In a few hours' time, President Biden is going to be sworn in his inauguration ceremony in Washington, D.C. Congratulations, Joe Biden. But what is his presidency actually going to bring? Well, of course, it's going to bring a great deal, but some of those things will be good, some will be less good. And let's just touch on a couple of those from my point of view. First of all, the good. President Biden or President-elect Biden, as he still is, has already stated that he will re-engage with the World Trade Organization and the World Health Organization. I think that's good. I know a lot of people will disagree with me, but for us back in the UK, let's just cast our mind back not very long ago. We were talking about Brexit, with a big debate about Brexit and how we were going to leave the European Union. And one of the options was to leave on World Trade Organization terms. Well, what if there hadn't been a World Trade Organization? World Health Organization, let's look at that. Well, we are suffering, as we all know only too well, from a worldwide pandemic involving coronavirus, COVID-19. Now, surely there needs to be some sort of global response to that, some coordinated response. And to coordinate a response, there has to be some sort of organization, some sort of body that does that job. And whilst the World Health Organization has been far from perfect, like the World Trade Organization, surely disengagement doesn't help because there is nothing else. So surely I would argue that the United States re-engaging positively with these organizations and working with the United Kingdom and other allies around the world to solve the problems, to address the political corruption, the nepotism and the failings of these organizations, to make them more efficient, to make them serve people better and the nations of the world better, has got to be a good thing. And let's, in the UK, not misunderstand what I'm saying. These organisations are not supranational governance bodies. They're not like the European Union. Being a member of the World Trade Organization, the World Health Organization, and so on, is not the same as being a member state of the European Union. The European Union as a supranational body with its own parliament, its own lawmaking authorities, and so on, and able to impose those on its member states. That is not the case with the World Health Organization, World Trade Organization, and others like the OSCE and whoever it might be. So in some respects, that re-engagement that the Biden administration has pledged to engage on is a good thing. The other thing is on China. Now, there's good and bad here from the Biden administration. On China, of course, the Biden administration is likely to re-engage on things like trade. But I suspect strongly that when they really are hit with the understanding of the depth of the genocide that China is committing against the Uyghurs and the human rights and the restrictions on freedom of speech and so on in Hong Kong, then I think you will see a Biden administration being pretty robust, pretty tough in its dealings with China. But on the bad side, because there's good and bad to everything, on the bad side in terms of the Biden administration, there's already worrying signals coming out. Joe Biden stated a few days ago that the priority for his administration was going to be blacks, Asians, Hispanics, and women. There's something glaringly missing from that list. Glaringly missing. And it's those people who actually occupied the Capitol building a couple of weeks ago. It's those people, those working class, white, male, straight people who actually feel excluded. And over recent months, over the last couple of years, with Black Lives Matter protests and the left and the Democrats giving support to that, that has made these people feel that they've been excluded. A real leader, a real future president of the United States should be including everybody. He shouldn't be making speeches saying, my administration's priorities are blacks, Hispanics, Asians and women. He should be saying, you are all Americans, every single one of you, no matter what your background, no matter what your race, no matter what your colour, your religion, your gender, you are all Americans. And I am going to be your president, all of you, and you are all my priority. But he didn't do that. He has not done that. What he has done is he's pursued identity politics. He's given people labels, and that is divisive. I'll talk about that in a moment. But okay, so that's Joe Biden. But what of President Donald Trump's legacy? Well, again, perhaps if we're being really objective and balanced about this, it's good and it's bad. On the good side, on the positive side, wages are up since he became president. Financial markets are up. Unemployment is down. Unemployment rates are down. There's less unemployment. Poverty rates are down. There's fewer poor people in the United States. And he's also woken the world up to China. I mentioned China earlier, but it is President Trump who has provided global leadership. Here in the UK, quite possibly, if it hadn't been for the United States under Donald Trump's leadership, we would not have U-turned on the engagement of China in our 5G network. And I'm very, very pleased that we did. I'm very pleased that they're no longer involved in our strategic communications infrastructure. President Trump has woken the world up to the fact that China is an existential threat in the South China Sea, in Kashmir, in its buying up of vast tracts of land in Africa so they can access the mineral resources that those countries are going to need in future if they're going to build their economy and support their populations. And the population of Africa is growing rapidly. And if those economies aren't built, because China has nicked all the resources from those countries and paid politicians huge amounts of money and thereby fed corruption in those countries. If it hadn't been for that, if it wasn't for China doing that, then quite possibly those economies would be able to be built. And where are these people going to go if those economies aren't built? They're going to move towards Europe, surely. They're certainly not going to be moving towards China. So there is a direct impact in terms that we will feel from the fact that those resources are no longer in the hands of the African nations. They're in the hands of China. Cyber attacks on the West, intellectual property theft. The threats from China are many and diverse, and we have to wake up to that. President Trump has started to wake the world up to that. So that's on the good side. On the bad side, then obviously President Trump has exacerbated the problems in terms of division and social and political polarization in the United States. It was his words that really provided encouragement for the protesters a couple of weeks ago to march on the Capitol building and indeed to occupy it. I don't believe that was intentional. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't, and that's probably something for a court of law to decide, and indeed that's going to be going to the Senate to hear the evidence on that. Okay, let's let that course follow its route and let's see what the outcome is. However, he did encourage that. That's got to be bad. It wasn't a good thing to do. And indeed, perhaps sometimes he's fired from the far too many times. He's caused the United States some embarrassment. In fact, more recently, he's in denying the election result, and he's not only encouraged political polarization in the United States and division and tension, but he's also handed America's enemies a gift in the terms of propaganda against the United States. So that's all negative. But is President Trump the actual problem? I don't believe he is. I think he's a symptom of the problem. The problem actually has its roots in two other places. There are two other groups of people who are responsible for what has happened recently, and they are trying to palm off all the blame to President Trump. I'm not saying he's blameless, not at all. I'm not excusing him. But the source of the problem comes from two other places. The media is the first one. Broadcasters, presenters, journalists, so many of them have been pursuing a personal agenda, pushing their opinions out to you. What we should be demanding is actually information from them, balanced, objective, accurate information. We shouldn't be interested in whether or not a particular interviewer managed to embarrass a minister or a Secretary of State. We shouldn't be interested in them boosting their own ego and their own viewing numbers. We should be demanding objective, balanced information so that we can make decisions. Why do we need to make decisions? Because it is us, the electorate, who are responsible for holding government and politicians to account. It is not, as these media outlets and these presenters peddle, it is not their job to hold governments and politicians to account. It's their job to inform us. We are the electorate, and in a democracy, it is the electorate who hold politicians to account through the ballot. And of course, talking about the ballot, the United States has erred on this. It has made a fundamental mistake. President Trump and the Republicans are convinced that there was widespread voter fraud in the last election. And indeed, there probably was, because there is fraud in every election. And the postal ballots certainly don't help. But the administration of the courts failed, and the state assemblies really failed to understand that this is fundamental. If people have concerns about the legitimacy of an election, then you have to address those concerns in a transparent manner. You can't just say, well, it didn't happen, and walk away from it. Okay, the results, actually, we saw in the occupation of the capital. So the integrity of the electoral system really depends on that transparency and that decisiveness and urgency that you apply in terms of investigating any concerns there are over fraud. That wasn't done. That wasn't President Trump's fault. President Trump's fault in this respect was to deny the election, the election result, because ultimately democracy doesn't work if the loser refuses to accept that they've lost. So President Trump isn't entirely to blame in that respect. The media is. The media has been pushing this idea that they are the ones to hold politicians to account. That is false. That is absolutely false. It is your job to do that as the electorate, and you should be demanding from these presenters, these interviewers, these broadcasters, you should be demanding objective, balanced, and accurate reporting. Yes, interrogate ministers. Don't peddle your own view. It's not your job to shape my opinion or anybody else's. It's your job to inform it. Okay. The other group of people who are to blame, in my view, for all that's happened in the United States and this division, this polarization, and the violence that's occurred, is politicians themselves. Politicians who have been pursuing identity politics. And indeed, Joe Biden is already doing that in his reference to blacks, Hispanics, Asians, and women. He is excluding straight white men, for example. He's labeling people. It's identity politics. As I said earlier, he should be talking about all Americans, regardless of their background, color, religion, and so on. But he wasn't. He was giving people labels. And in this country, people do the same thing. Politicians do the same thing. It's easy, lazy politics. It's catering to your own electorate, the people that you want support from. And it's excluding the others. If you exclude other people, they will get upset. They will express their dissatisfaction and their frustration in some way. And if you still fail to address it, then there will be violence. And indeed, the bigger that group, the more dangerous that becomes. And remember, 74 million people voted for President Trump. And bear in mind, those of us in the UK, there's only 67 million people in the UK. So more people voted for President Trump than the entire population, men, women, and children in the United Kingdom. So he got a significant number of votes. In fact, more than he got when he won the presidency in 2016. So let us not, for a moment, think that the fact that he lost means that now there's unity in the United States. There is not. And responsible politicians will address that problem, and they will not pass it on and simply blame President Trump. So, looking forward, now we've got another president for another 4 years, another administration. Let's hope that President Biden and his administration do see the light. They do start to work to unify the United States, to address this identity politics, that they don't engage on it any further, because I don't want the United States, our oldest and closest ally in the world, to be suffering any more division. I certainly don't want it to get any worse. And likewise, though, I don't want it to infect us anymore. The whole Black Lives Matter, Antifa, the left-wing politicians in the United States and in the UK have taken the knee. They've kowtowed to this identity politics. It's easy, lazy politics. It's not the politics of unity. It is the politics of division. And that is irresponsible to pursue. And that is irresponsible to support. National politicians should be saying, you are all Americans, you are all Brits. And there is nothing wrong with being a proud Brit or a proud American. Be patriotic, be humble in your patriotism, but be proud. Don't be a nationalist. Don't be aggressive about how you feel about your nation. Be simply proud. You be proud of your culture, your history, your people, your nation. And here, there's a bit of a mistake, isn't there? Because people conflate the two, patriotism and nationalism. Just let me touch on that. Patriotism is the defense of your own culture and way of life. Nationalism is believing it to such an extent you want to impose it on others. And remember, we are all in this country British. And if we're not, then you're not part of it, I'm afraid. You're a visitor. You're a welcome visitor perhaps, but you're a visitor nonetheless. This is the British culture. British people own that culture. Likewise in the United States. Let us be proud of who we are, our heritage, our background. Let's learn from the mistakes of our history, but let's not simply say we made mistakes and therefore we should be ashamed of it. That's not correct. That's not true. We should be patriots, but not nationalists. President Trump, I believe, is a patriot. A lot of the people who followed him are nationalists. There are a lot of people I've met in politics who are nationalists. They're not healthy. These are people who simply do not contribute to the healthy welfare of a nation state. So, anyway, let's look forward to 4 years of President Biden. Let's hope that he works towards unifying the United States. Let's hope that he works with the United Kingdom and others to build a peaceful world going forward. But let's all, President Biden, Vice President Harris, everybody in the UK, let's please reject media that has an agenda. Presenters who are there to peddle their own opinion and shape yours in their way. Let's reject them as much as we reject politicians who pursue identity politics. And then we're going to have a good 4 years, and we're going to have a good few years beyond that as well.